The sound came first, flesh against wood, the kind of impact that cuts through every other noise in a room and leaves only silence in its wake. James Donovan heard it from across the diner. His hand stopped halfway to his coffee cup. 14 years of combat had taught him to recognize that sound. Violence has a signature, a rhythm, and this was just the beginning. At the center of the coastal diner, an older woman's face was pressed against a Formica table. Blood began to pool around her cheek. A young man in expensive clothes held her by the hair, grinding her face into the surface while his friends laughed and filmed on their phones. "Say you're sorry," the young man demanded. His voice carried the slurred confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences. "Say it again." "I'm sorry." The woman's voice was barely a whisper. "Please, I'm so sorry." He yanked her head up and slammed it down again. The second impact was worse than the first. Under the table, Ghost went rigid. 70 pounds of German Shepherd tan and black coat rippling over coiled muscle. The dog's amber eyes locked onto the young man with predator focus. A growl built in his chest, low and dangerous. James didn't move yet. He was still assessing, calculating. 14 years as a Navy SEAL didn't leave you. It changed how you saw the world. Every room became a tactical situation. Every person became a potential threat or asset. 4 young people, early to mid-20s, designer clothes that cost more than his motorcycle. The kind of arrogance that came from never being told no. The woman on the floor wore a name tag that read Maggie. Late 50s, maybe 60. Dark hair streaked with gray pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her uniform was the pale blue of someone who'd worked the same job for decades. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow. No one in the diner moved. A fisherman at the counter kept his eyes down. An elderly couple pretended to read their menus. A mother pulled her young daughter closer and whispered something about keeping quiet. James had seen this before. Fear, the paralyzing kind that made good people invisible. "Someone get me napkins," the young man snapped his fingers at Maggie. "And a manager, you're buying me a new shirt." "I can't afford," Maggie's voice broke. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you spilled water on me." One of his friends, a broad-shouldered kid in a polo shirt, laughed. "Dude, just let it go. She's not worth it." "She's worth exactly what I say she's worth." The young man grabbed Maggie's arm and yanked her to her feet. "Now apologize to my girlfriend for making a scene." "I'm sorry," Maggie whispered to the young woman with the phone. "I'm so sorry." "Pathetic." The young man shoved her, hard. Maggie fell. She caught herself on her hands and stayed there on the linoleum floor. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. That's when James stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate. The chair scraped against the floor and the sound cut through the diner like a blade. Ghost rose beside him. The dog's training was evident in every line of his body, controlled aggression, waiting for the command. "Let her go." James's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the weight of a man who'd given orders in places where disobedience meant death. The young man turned. His eyes swept over James's appearance. Leather jacket worn soft with age, faded jeans, boots that had walked through more than city streets. The tattoo visible on James's forearm, a trident and eagle, Navy SEAL insignia. The young man's lip curled. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who's asking nicely." James took one step forward. Just one. "Let her go." "Oh, this is perfect." The young man laughed and glanced at his friends. "A biker playing hero. What did they let you out of the VA for lunch?" "I'm not going to ask again." "Or what?" The young man released Maggie and squared up to James. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with the build of someone who'd played lacrosse at an expensive prep school. But his stance was wrong. Weight too far forward. Hands open and untrained. Amateur. "Listen, biker trash," the young man said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't know what dive bar you crawled out of, but around here my family's name means something. So why don't you take your mutt and get back to whatever hole you came from before I make some calls?" Ghost's growl intensified. James didn't look down, but he felt the dog's readiness through the leash wrapped around his hand. One word. That's all it would take. "I'm not going to tell you again," James said quietly. "Apologize to her, pay for her medical bills, and leave." "More what?" James held his gaze. "Or you're going to find out why they trained me." Something flickered in the young man's eyes. Not quite fear, not yet, but recognition that maybe, just maybe, he'd miscalculated. Then it passed. "You know what?" The young man smiled, the smile of someone who'd never lost. "I think I'd rather see what you've got." He threw the first punch. James had been waiting for it. He sidestepped, caught the young man's wrist, and twisted. The motion was fluid, almost gentle, but the result was immediate. The young man's arm locked behind his back at an angle that made him cry out, "Let go. Let go of me." "I asked nicely," James said, applying just enough pressure to make the point. Not enough to break anything, just enough to hurt. "You should have listened." The friend in the polo shirt rushed forward. Ghost intercepted him, teeth bared, forcing him back against a table. "Stay," James commanded without looking. The friend froze. The other two friends, another young man and the girlfriend with the phone, scrambled backward. Both had their phones out now, recording everything. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" The young man's voice had gone shrill. "My father will destroy you. He owns the sheriff. He owns the judges. He owns this whole goddamn county." "I don't care who your father is." James increased the pressure slightly. The young man whimpered. "What I care about is that woman you just assaulted. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize. You're going to give her $10,000 for medical expenses and emotional damages. And then you're going to leave this town and never come back." "You're insane." "Maybe." James's voice was calm, controlled. "But I'm also the guy holding your arm. So what's it going to be?" The diner door burst open. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Two deputies rushed in, hands on their holsters, followed by a man in a khaki uniform with a silver star on his chest. Sheriff Wade Holbrook was in his 50s, thick around the middle, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent too many years making bad deals. His eyes swept the scene and landed on the young man in James's grip. "Mr. Aldrich, are you all right?" James didn't release his hold. "Sheriff, this man assaulted that woman. I have 17 witnesses." Holbrook barely glanced at Maggie, still sitting on the floor with blood on her face. "Let him go. Now." "He committed a crime. Arrest him." "I said let him go." Holbrook's hand dropped to his weapon. "Or I'll arrest you for assault." James measured the situation. Two deputies, both nervous, both with hands on their guns but not drawn. The sheriff was angry but controlled. And behind it all, the young man's smirk was returning. He knew how this would go. James released him anyway. "Smart move, soldier." Holbrook stepped between them while the young man, Mr. Aldrich, scrambled backward, rubbing his wrist. "Now, I don't know where you're from, but around here we have a way of handling things. And it doesn't involve strangers putting their hands on respected members of the community." "Respected?" James looked at Maggie, still on the floor, blood dripping from her eyebrow. He just slammed her face into a table. Multiple times. Everyone saw it. "I saw a clumsy waitress who tripped and fell." Holbrook turned to the diner. His voice carried threat. "Anyone here see different?" Silence. The fisherman kept his eyes down. The elderly couple studied their menus with sudden intensity. Even the mother with her daughter looked away. "That's what I thought." Holbrook smiled at James. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Now I'm going to give you one chance to collect your dog and leave. Otherwise, I'm taking you in for assault, disturbing the peace, and anything else I can think of on the way to the station." James felt Ghost press against his leg. The dog was still rigid, still watching, but waiting for the command that wouldn't come. "Not here. Not now." "Maggie," James spoke directly to the woman on the floor. "Are you okay?" She looked up at him with terrified eyes, her mouth open, closed. She wanted to speak. He could see it, but fear held her silent. "Don't talk to her." Holbrook stepped closer. "Don't talk to anyone. Just get out." James held Maggie's gaze for a moment longer, then he nodded slightly. A promise she probably didn't understand yet. "Come on, Ghost." He walked toward the door. Every step felt wrong. Everything in his training screamed to stay, to fight, to protect. But he knew something none of them did. This wasn't over. Not even close. As he passed Connor Aldrich, because that's who the young man was. Connor Aldrich, son of the most powerful family in Crescent Bay, the kid laughed. "That's right. Walk away. Go back to whatever veteran's shelter you crawled out of and play with your service dog. Leave the real world to people who matter." James stopped. He turned his head just enough to meet Connor's eyes. "You assaulted that woman in front of 17 witnesses," James said softly. Every word landed like a hammer. "You did it while your friends filmed it. And you did it wearing clothes that cost more than most people make in a month." His voice was calm, controlled. But underneath it ran something that made Connor's smile falter. "Men like you think money makes you untouchable. But I've spent 14 years hunting men who thought they were untouchable." James smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "I always found them." The confidence drained from Connor's face. James walked out. The Oregon coast hit him with wind and salt spray. Ghost stayed close, still alert, still ready. They crossed the parking lot to James's Harley-Davidson, a 1984 Softail he'd rebuilt himself over 6 months of grief and insomnia. The dog jumped into the custom sidecar, reinforced climate-controlled, everything Ghost needed for long rides. "Good boy," James murmured, scratching behind Ghost's ears. "Stand down." Ghost settled but didn't relax. His eyes stayed on the diner door. James climbed onto the bike and sat there for a moment. His hands rested on the handlebars. They weren't shaking. They never shook anymore. But inside, something had awakened. Something he'd thought he'd buried with Elena. 8 months dead now. Cancer had taken her body over 18 brutal months. But the stress had started long before that. The calls, the threats. The collection notices that came every day, sometimes twice a day, from a lending company that charged interest rates that should have been criminal. It had taken James 3 months after her death to trace those loans. 3 months of digging through shell companies and false names until he found the source. Aldrich Financial Group, owned by Victor Aldrich Sr., the same Victor Aldrich whose son had just beaten a woman in a diner. The same family that owned the sheriff, the judges, and half the county. James had come to this town for a reason. He'd been watching, gathering information, waiting for the right moment. He hadn't expected it to come like this. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I know who you are. Old Lighthouse Keeper's Cottage. 10 p.m. tonight. Come alone. It's about Elena." James stared at the message. Ghost whined softly beside him. "I know, boy," James said. "I know." He started the Harley and pulled out of the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, he saw Holbrook and his deputies escorting Connor to a shiny black Range Rover. Saw Maggie standing in the diner doorway watching him leave. Her eyes held something he recognized. Hope. The desperate, fragile kind that came from finally seeing someone stand up. James merged onto the coastal highway. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly to his right, gray and churning under storm clouds. Elena had loved the ocean. She'd always wanted to retire near the water. "We'll get a little house," she used to say. "Nothing fancy, just somewhere we can hear the waves at night." She never got that house. But James was going to make sure the men responsible paid for it. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. Elena on their wedding day. 22 years old, dark hair blowing in the wind, laughing at something he'd said. She'd been a combat medic, deployed twice to Afghanistan before they'd met at a veterans support group in San Diego. The toughest person he'd ever known. And Aldrich Financial had broken her. James tucked the photo back into his jacket and accelerated. The Harley's engine roared, carrying him north along the coast toward the Victorian house on the cliff, Elena's grandfather's place. The last piece of property her family owned, the place James had come to heal. But healing would have to wait. The text message burned in his mind. It's about Elena. Someone knew, someone had been watching, and tonight James would find out who. Ghost settled into the sidecar, trusting his handler to navigate whatever came next. The Pacific Coast Highway stretched ahead, winding through pine forests and along cliffsides where the ocean crashed against black rocks. This part of Oregon was beautiful in a harsh way, unforgiving. The kind of place that broke weak things and made strong things stronger. James had spent 8 months here in Elena's grandfather's house trying to become strong again. He'd failed. Because strength, he'd learned, wasn't about forgetting the war. It was about remembering why you fought. And James had just remembered. The Victorian house sat on a promontory 3 miles north of Crescent Bay, built in 1912 by Elena's great-grandfather, a timber baron who'd made his fortune in the old-growth forest before conservation laws shut down the big operations. 3 stories of weathered gray shingles in white trim with a wraparound porch that overlooked the ocean. James had arrived 8 months ago with nothing but Ghost, a duffel bag of clothes, and a heart so broken he could barely breathe. The house had been abandoned for 20 years. Elena's family couldn't afford to maintain it, couldn't afford to sell it. Either the property was underwater on liens and back taxes. It had sat empty, slowly surrendering to the salt air and Pacific storms. James had spent the first month just making it livable. New roof, fixed the plumbing, repaired the ancient furnace. The work had been good for him, physical labor that let his mind go quiet for hours at a time. But the quiet never lasted. Now he pulled the Harley into the gravel driveway and killed the engine. Ghost jumped out of the sidecar and immediately began a perimeter check. Old habits from their deployments together. The dump had been with SEAL Team 6 for 4 years before retiring. Multi-purpose canine, explosives detection, patrol, attack work. After Ghost's first handler was killed in Kandahar, the dog had been reassigned to James. That was 6 years ago. They'd been through things together that most people couldn't imagine. Ghost completed his sweep and returned to James's side. Nothing. The property was secure. Inside the house smelled like wood smoke and coffee. James had kept only 2 rooms furnished, the kitchen and 1 bedroom upstairs. Everything else remained empty, echoing. He went to the kitchen and spread out what he'd been gathering for the past 3 months. Files, documents, photographs, everything he could find on Aldrich Financial Group and the family that ran it. Victor Aldrich Sr., age 64, CEO and founder, built the company from nothing in 1989, just 3 years after his wife died. Started with payday loans and small cash advances. Grew into one of the largest private lending institutions on the West Coast. On paper, everything was legal. Predatory, but legal. But James had dug deeper. He'd found the victims, hundreds of them. Families who'd taken loans for medical emergencies, home repairs, education. Families who'd been charged interest rates that compounded so fast they could never catch up. Families who'd lost everything, including Elena. March 2024. Elena's oncologist had recommended an experimental treatment not covered by insurance. $52,000. No, they didn't have it. Their savings were already gone from the first round of chemotherapy. Someone at the hospital, James never found out who had given Elena a business card. Aldrich Financial. Fast approval. Flexible terms. We help families in crisis. Elena had called them without telling James. She'd been trying to protect him, trying to give herself a chance without destroying their finances. By the time James found out, she'd already signed the papers. $52,000 at 31.5% variable interest. Within 7 months, the debt had grown to $94,000. The calls started. The harassment, a collector showing up at their house. At Elena's hospital room during her treatments, they told her she was killing their future, that she was selfish, that she should just give up and stop being a burden. Elena had died in October 2024. But she'd stopped fighting in August. The debt had killed her spirit before the cancer killed her body. James had spent the last 8 months tracking the paper trail. The loan had been processed by a woman named Margaret O'Brien. She'd worked for Aldrich Financial from 2019 to 2021 before being terminated. The same Margaret O'Brien who now worked as a waitress at the Coastal Diner. The same woman Connor Aldrich had just assaulted. James looked at the photograph of Maggie he'd taken from the Aldrich Financial Employee Database. Younger in the photo, before whatever had broken her. His phone showed 6:47 p.m., 3 hours until the meeting at the Lighthouse Cottage. James made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Ghost at his feet. Outside, the sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the clouds purple and gold. Elena had loved these sunsets. Promise me, she'd said in those final days. Promise me you'll find peace, not revenge. James had promised. But some promises were impossible to keep. At 9:30 p.m., James left the house. He took the Harley but left Ghost behind. The text had said, "Come alone," and Ghost's presence would be too obvious. "Guard," James told the dog, pointing at the house. Ghost settled on the porch alert. The lighthouse keeper's cottage was 2 miles south, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that wound through coastal pine forest. The lighthouse itself had been decommissioned in 1973, replaced by an automated beacon. The keeper's cottage had been abandoned even longer. James approached carefully. No headlight. Engine barely above idle. He stopped a quarter-mile out and continued on foot. The cottage appeared through the trees, small one-story shake roof, half collapsed. A single light burned in the window. Someone was already there. James circled wide, approaching from the ocean side, where the cliff dropped 200 feet to the rocks below. He moved silently. SEAL training never left you. Even after 14 years, his body remembered how to become invisible. Through the cottage window, he saw 2 figures. One was Maggie O'Brien. The other was an older woman he didn't recognize. Gray hair, expensive wool coat, the posture of someone who'd spent her life being listened to. James checked for lookouts, for vehicles, for any sign this was a trap. Nothing. He approached the front door and knocked. Silence. Then footsteps. Maggie opened the door. Up close, her face was worse than he'd thought. The cut above her eyebrow had been cleaned and bandaged, but her left eye was swelling shut. Bruises were already forming along her cheekbone. "Mr. Donovan," she said quietly, "thank you for coming. How do you know my name?" "Because I processed your wife's loan application." Her voice broke. "Because I'm the one who killed her." James's hand moved toward the Sig Sauer in his jacket before he caught himself. "I think you'd better explain," he said. Maggie stepped back. "This is Dr. Ruth Sullivan. She's been helping me gather evidence. We've been waiting for someone like you, someone who couldn't be bought or scared off." James entered the cottage. It smelled like mold and sea air. The only furniture was a card table and two folding chairs. On the table sat 3 USB drives and a thick folder of documents. "Sit down," Ruth Sullivan said. Her voice carried authority. "What we're about to tell you will change everything." James remained standing. "Start talking." Maggie took a shaky breath. "I worked for Aldrich Financial for 2 years, loan processing officer. I thought it was a legitimate company helping people in crisis. It took me 6 months to realize what we were really doing, which was targeting the dying." Ruth answered. Her voice was cold, clinical. "Aldrich Financial has a proprietary algorithm that searches public records for cancer diagnoses, terminal illnesses, catastrophic medical expenses. They find people in the window between diagnosis and death, the most desperate window, when someone will sign anything. The interest rates are technically legal," Maggie continued, "but they're structured to guarantee default. 30%, 35%, some as high as 40%, variable rates that can change monthly, fees buried in the fine print. By the time someone understands what they've signed, they're already drowning." James felt something cold spreading through his chest. Elena's loan. March 12, 2024. Maggie pulled out a file, Elena's name on the tab. "I processed it myself, I remember, because she was so kind. She apologized for taking up my time. She brought me coffee from the waiting room." Maggie's hands were shaking. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what would happen. But 3 months later I found out." "Found out what?" Ruth handed him one of the USB drives. "Internal emails. Maggie downloaded them before she was fired. They show everything. Victor Aldrich personally designed the targeting system. He calls it Final Window Protocol. Find terminal patients. Approve their loans immediately. Then activate aggressive collection before they die. If they die before paying, the estate is liable. If they survive, they're destroyed financially. Either way, Aldrich wins." James plugged the USB into his phone, started reading. The emails were worse than he'd imagined. Clinical discussions of mortality rates, calculations of how much they could extract before death, strategies for psychological pressure that stopped just short of illegal harassment. One email from Victor Aldrich to his senior staff dated October 2023, "Gentlemen, remember that our product is not money. Our product is hope. Hope is infinitely valuable to someone with no time left. Price accordingly." James's hands clenched. The phone screen cracked under his grip. "There's more," Ruth said quietly. "Show him the call recording song." Maggie handed him the second USB drive. "These are calls to your wife. I managed to retrieve them from the company server before my access was revoked." James plugged it in, selected a file at random. November 2024. Elena's voice weak and tired. "Please, I'm doing everything I can. The treatment is taking longer than expected." The collector's voice was professional, cheerful almost. "Mrs. Donovan, I understand. But you signed a contract. The payment is 2 weeks overdue. If we don't receive full payment by Friday, we'll have no choice but to begin seizure proceedings against your assets." "We don't have any assets. Everything went to medical bills." "Well, that's unfortunate. But perhaps you should consider whether continuing treatment is really in your family's best interest. You're putting your husband through tremendous financial stress. Is that fair to him?" A long silence. Then Elena crying, "What are you saying?" I'm saying that sometimes the kindest thing we can do for the people we love is let go." The recording ended. James stood motionless. If he moved, he would break something. If he spoke, he would lose control. "There are 47 calls like that," Maggie whispered. "They called her every day for 3 months. They told her she was destroying your future, that she was being selfish, that she should stop treatment and do the right thing. They killed her," Ruth said. "Not the cancer, them. They broke her spirit and she stopped fighting." James's voice came out hoarse. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because we've tried everything else," Maggie said. "I went to the FBI. The case was buried. I went to the state attorney general. Nothing. I went to journalists. Victor Aldrich owns 3 newspapers and has relationships with the rest. His influence goes deep," Ruth added. "Sheriff Holbrook is on his payroll. Judge Morrison, who handles most civil cases in this county, owes Aldrich $500,000 in campaign contributions. 2 state legislators, 1 congressman. The corruption is systematic." "So why me?" Maggie met his eyes. "Because you're a Navy SEAL. Because you walked into that diner this morning and did what nobody else would do. Because you don't scare easy." She paused. "And because they killed your wife, you have nothing left to lose." James looked at the evidence spread across the table. The USBs, the files. 8 months of rage crystallizing into something sharp and focused. What do you want from me? Help us destroy them, Ruth said simply. We have evidence, we have witnesses, we have documentation of everything they've done. But we need someone who can bring it to people who can't be bought. Someone who knows how to fight. I'm not a lawyer. No, Maggie said. You're something better. You're a warrior who knows right from wrong. James picked up the third USB drive. What's on this one? Names, Ruth answered. 347 families destroyed by Aldrich Financial in the last 5 years. Medical histories, loan documents, collection call recordings, death certificates. She paused. Your wife was number 212. James pocketed all 3 drives. I need to make a call. He stepped outside. The ocean roared below the cliff, invisible in the darkness. He dialed a number he hadn't called in 8 months. 3 rings. Then Reaper that you Commander Nolan Hayes, former SEAL Team 6, now with Naval Criminal Investigative Service. I need a favor, James said. Name it. I'm sending you encrypted files. Evidence of federal racketeering, systematic fraud, predatory lending targeting terminal patients. I need you to get it to someone at FBI who can't be bought. Silence on the line. Then, Jesus Reaper, what have you gotten into? Something that killed Elena. Another pause. Send me everything. I'll route it through proper channels. But James, you need to come in. If this is as big as you're saying, you need federal protection. Not yet. I need you to verify the evidence first. Make sure it's solid. And then what? Then I'm going to make sure everyone involved pays for what they did. Reaper, I'll call you in 72 hours. Yes, James hung up and went back inside. Maggie and Ruth were waiting. I have contacts at NCIS, James said. They'll verify your evidence and route it to the right people. But it's going to take time. Days, maybe weeks. We don't have weeks, Ruth said. Maggie's house is being foreclosed in 30 days. After what Connor did today, they're going to accelerate everything. Make an example of her. James looked at Maggie. You took a loan from them too. She nodded. 2022. My son, he's a disabled veteran. Construction accident left him unable to work. I took a bridge loan to cover his medical expenses. $73,000. I'm a waitress. I'll never pay it off. Your son, what's his name? Sean O'Brien, he's 32. James filed that away. How much time before they move on the house? 4 weeks, but after today, Maggie touched her bruised face. Connor won't let this go. He never does. What do you mean, Ruth answered. Connor Aldrich has assaulted 7 women in the last 4 years. We have documentation, medical records, police reports that mysteriously went nowhere, settlement agreements with massive non-disclosure clauses. He targets women who can't fight back, women with debt, women with something to lose. He's been harassing Maggie for 8 months, Ruth continued. Ever since she tried to file a complaint about workplace conditions at Aldrich Financial, shows up at the diner, follows her home, makes sure she knows she can't escape. James felt Ghost's absence. The dog would have sensed his rising anger, would have pressed against his leg to ground him. I need you to stay low, James said to both women. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't talk to anyone about this. I'll handle it from here. Handle it how? Maggie asked. I haven't decided yet. He gathered the USB drives and headed for the door. Mr. Donovan, Maggie called after him. Why are you doing this? You don't know us. James stopped, turned. Someone should have helped my wife, he said quietly. Someone should have stood up and said, no, this is wrong, this stops here. But nobody did. She died thinking she was a burden, thinking she'd failed me. His voice hardened. I'm not going to make that mistake again. He walked out into the night. Behind him through the cottage window, he could see Maggie crying, Ruth holding her. James started the Harley and rode back to the Victorian house. The ocean was invisible in the darkness, but he could hear it, endless and patient. Ghost was waiting on the porch. The dog stood as James approached, tail wagging once. Good boy, James said, guards over. Inside, he uploaded the 3 USB drives to the encrypted military server. Sent them to Nolan Hayes with a message, verify en route to clean FBI contact. Timeline is critical. We'll call in 72 hours. Then he sat at the kitchen table and opened Elena's file again. Read every email. Listened to every call recording. Memorized the names of every Aldrich Financial employee who'd participated in her psychological destruction. 47 calls over 3 months. 16 different collectors. All supervised by Victor Aldrich personally. At 2:17 a.m., James finally closed the laptop. Ghost was asleep at his feet. The house was quiet except for the wind outside and the distant crash of waves. James pulled out the photograph of Elena, studied her face in the dim light. "Promise me you'll find peace, not revenge." "I'm sorry, love," he whispered. "I can't keep that promise." He put the photograph on the makeshift altar he'd created in the corner of the kitchen. Elena's picture, her Marine Corps combat medic badge, the folded American flag from her funeral. Added something new tonight, the flash drive containing evidence that would destroy Aldrich Financial. "I'm going to make them pay," James said to the photograph, to the memory, to the ghost of the woman he'd loved. "Every single one of them. I promise you that." Outside, storm clouds were moving in from the Pacific. By morning, the rain would come, and James Donovan would begin the war he'd been preparing for since the day Elena died. He just didn't know yet that in 72 hours he'd be the one running. Ghost stirred in his sleep, dreaming of things only dogs remember. The storm drew closer. And in Crescent Bay, in a mansion on the hill, Victor Aldrich was watching security footage of the lighthouse keeper's cottage. Watching James Donovan leave, knowing exactly what would come next. The war had already begun. James just didn't know it yet. The smell woke him. Gasoline, sharp and chemical, cutting through the salt air that usually filled the Victorian house. James's eyes opened. His hand moved to the Sig Sauer under his pillow before his brain fully engaged. 2:47 a.m. He'd been asleep less than 3 hours. Ghost was already at the bedroom door, hackles raised, a growl building low in his chest. James rolled out of bed silently, grabbed his jeans and boots, moved to the window and looked down at the yard. 4 figures, moving around the perimeter of the house, each carrying something. Even in the darkness, James recognized the shapes. Gas cans. His mind shifted into combat mode. Threat assessment, exit routes, tactical options, 4 hostiles, armed probably. Professional movement patterns. This wasn't amateur hour. The house had 3 exits. Front door, back door through the kitchen, cellar tunnel that opened onto the beach below the cliff. His grandfather-in-law had built it during Prohibition for running bootleg whiskey. That was the play. James grabbed his go bag, always packed, always ready. Habit from 14 years of deployments where you might have 60 seconds to move. He clipped Ghost's tactical vest on. The dog understood immediately. This was work. They moved down the stairs in darkness. James knew every creak, every loose board, avoided them all. Through the kitchen, down to the cellar. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a false wall of wine racks. James pulled the lever and the wall swung open. Behind them, glass shattered. The sound of liquid splashing. They were inside the house. James and Ghost entered the tunnel, pulled the wine rack closed behind them. The tunnel was narrow, carved from bedrock, shored up with timber that had lasted nearly a century. It ran 300 feet at a downward angle, emerging in a sea cave at the base of the cliff. Halfway through, James heard the explosion. The Victorian house going up. Elena's grandfather's house. The last piece of her family's history. Gone. James kept moving. Emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford right now. They emerged from the sea cave onto a rocky beach. The Pacific crashed against the shore, white foam visible in the darkness. James pulled out his phone and activated the police scanner app. Voices crackled through Alpha, team primary target escaped. Confirm visual. Negative, building is fully involved. No movement. A different voice, calm and controlled. Bravo team, execute secondary target. James's blood went cold. Secondary target. Ruth Sullivan. He pulled up the address Maggie had given him. Ruth's house was 12 miles inland. James had the Harley hidden in a storage unit 2 miles south, but there was no time. He ran. Ghost kept pace easily. The dog was built for this. 4 years of combat deployments had conditioned him for sustained operations. James reached the storage unit in 11 minutes. Unlocked it, fired up the Harley. Ghost jumped into the sidecar without being told. They roared onto the coastal highway. James's phone showed 3:04 a.m. He didn't know when Bravo team had been activated. Didn't know if he was already too late. The Harley screamed through the darkness. James took the curves at speeds that would have killed most riders. But he'd been riding since he was 16. The bike was an extension of his body. 12 miles took 9 minutes. He saw the glow before he reached the street. Ruth Sullivan's house was a 2-story craftsman in a quiet residential neighborhood. Or it had been. Now it was an inferno. Flames shot through the roof. Black smoke billowed into the night sky. James could hear the fire from 2 blocks away, a hungry, consuming roar. No fire trucks yet. Response time in this neighborhood should have been 6 minutes. It had been at least 15 since the fire started. Someone had delayed the dispatch. James pulled up in front of the house, killed the engine, scanned for Bravo team. Nothing. They were already gone. A crowd was gathering, neighbors in bathrobes and pajamas. Someone screaming for someone to call 911. James looked at the house. Second floor left side. A window. Movement behind the smoke and flames. Ruth Sullivan. Trapped. Every rational part of his brain said the same thing: structural collapse imminent, no protective gear, suicide to enter. James ignored all of it. He grabbed a jacket from his saddlebag, soaked it in water from a neighbor's garden hose, wrapped it around his head and shoulders. Ghost, stay. The dog whined but obeyed. James went through the front door. The heat hit him like a physical force. The living room was fully involved, flames consuming furniture and walls. Black smoke reduced visibility to inches. James dropped low, stayed below the smoke layer, crawled toward the stairs. The stairs were compromised. He could feel them shifting under his weight, took them 3 at a time, distributing his weight to minimize stress on any single point. Second floor hallway. The smoke was worse here. James couldn't see anything, couldn't breathe. His lungs were screaming. He followed the wall, found a door, kicked it open. Ruth's bedroom. She was at the window trying to open it. The frame had swollen from the heat. She was coughing, barely conscious. Dr. Sullivan? She turned, saw him. Her eyes widened in disbelief. James crossed the room, grabbed a chair and smashed the window. Fresh air rushed in, feeding the fire behind them. The room temperature spiked instantly. We need to move, now. He could hear the house groaning, support beams failing. They had seconds. James picked Ruth up. She was heavier than she looked, but adrenaline made everything possible. He carried her to the hallway. The stairs were no longer an option. Flames had consumed the entire first floor. Only one way out. James kicked open the bathroom door. Second floor bathroom had a window overlooking the backyard. Lower drop, maybe 15 feet. He smashed the window with his elbow, climbed onto the sill with Ruth in his arms. Hold on to me. She wrapped her arms around his neck. James jumped. They hit the grass hard. James rolled, absorbing the impact, protecting Ruth with his body. Something in his left side screamed, probably cracked a rib. Didn't matter. He got to his feet, lifted Ruth again, carried her around the house to the front yard. Ghost was there immediately. The crowd had grown. Someone was shouting about an ambulance. James laid Ruth on the lawn. She was coughing, face covered in soot, but breathing. You're okay, he told her. Stay down. Breathe. That's when the sheriff's cars arrived. 3 cruisers, lights flashing. Sheriff Wade Holbrook stepped out of the lead vehicle, but the fire trucks were still nowhere to be seen. Holbrook walked straight to James. His face was stone. James Donovan, you're under arrest for 2 counts of arson and attempted murder. The words didn't make sense at first. James was still processing, still coming down from the adrenaline. What? You heard me. Holbrook gestured to his deputies. We have a witness who saw your motorcycle leaving Dr. Sullivan's residence at 2:30 a.m. We found gas cans in your saddlebags. And now here you are at the scene of the fire you set. James looked at his Harley. 2 deputies were photographing the saddlebags. One of them pulled out a red gas can, planted evidence. I just saved her life, James said quietly. His voice was hoarse from smoke inhalation. Convenient story. Holbrook moved closer. You assault Connor Aldrich at the diner. You make threats. Now 2 buildings connected to the Aldrich family burned down in one night. Seems pretty clear to me. The Victorian house was mine, and you probably burned it for the insurance money. Arson for profit. That's a federal charge. James looked past Holbrook to the crowd of neighbors, saw their faces, some confused, some angry, already believing he was guilty. This was the play. They'd framed him perfectly. Where's your dog? Holbrook asked. James's heart rate spiked. Why went? Dangerous animal. Attacked Connor Aldrich this morning. Needs to be taken into custody. County Animal Control. Ghost was sitting 20 feet away. The dog's eyes were locked on Holbrook. One word from James and Ghost would take him down. But there were 6 deputies, all armed, all with hands near their weapons. If James gave the command, Ghost would attack. The deputies would shoot. Ghost would die. James couldn't let that happen. Ghost, here. The dog came immediately, sat at James's side. A deputy approached with a catch pole. Ghost growled but didn't move, waiting for James's command. It's okay, boy, James said softly. Stand down. The deputy secured the catch pole around Ghost's neck, led him toward an animal control van that had just arrived. Ghost looked back at James, confused. Betrayed. James felt something break inside his chest. Turn around, Holbrook said. Hands behind your back. James complied. The handcuffs clicked tight around his wrists. You have the right to remain silent, Holbrook began. But James wasn't listening. He was watching the animal control van drive away with Ghost inside, watching Ruth Sullivan being loaded into an ambulance. Her eyes met his for a moment. She mouthed something. Thank you. The Victorian house was still burning on the horizon. James could see the glow against the night sky. Elena's house. Gone. The evidence USB drives, gone. Ghost, taken. In less than 12 hours, they'd destroyed everything. Almost everything. James still had the copies he'd uploaded to the encrypted server. Still had Nolan Hayes working the federal angle. But right now, sitting in the back of Holbrook's cruiser watching the town of Crescent Bay roll past through the window, James knew the truth. He'd underestimated them. That wouldn't happen again. The county jail was a low concrete building behind the courthouse, built in the 1970s, never updated. James was processed through booking. Fingerprints, mugshot, personal effects confiscated. They put him in a holding cell by himself, 6 by 8 feet, concrete bench, steel toilet. Nothing else. The door slammed shut with the sound of finality. James sat on the bench and took inventory. Physical condition, minor burns on his hands and forearms. Possible cracked rib on the left side. Smoke inhalation, nothing critical. Tactical situation, catastrophic. No weapons, no allies, no evidence. Framed for arson and attempted murder. Sheriff's Department completely compromised. Options extremely limited. He closed his eyes and forced himself to think. The fire at Ruth's house had been set before the attack on the Victorian. That meant they'd planned both simultaneously. Coordinated operation. Professional execution. Someone with military or intelligence training. Raymond Keller. Had to be. Victor Aldrich's head of security. Former Delta Force according to the background James had compiled. This was a message. You came after our family. We'll destroy everything you have. But they'd made one mistake. They'd let Ruth Sullivan live. And they'd let James live. That meant Victor wanted him alive, wanted him discredited and imprisoned. A convicted felon's testimony would be worthless in court. Smart, but not smart enough. James had 72 hours before his check-in call with Nolan Hayes. If he didn't make that call, Nolan would know something was wrong, would start asking questions. James just had to survive 72 hours in a jail controlled by a corrupt sheriff. He'd survived worse. The hours crawled past. No food, no water, no contact. At 6 a.m., footsteps in the corridor. The cell door opened. A young woman in a deputy's uniform stood there. Blonde, athletic build, maybe 30 years old. Her nameplate read Reeves. On your feet, she said, come with me. James stood. Where? Interrogation. She led him through the corridor, but instead of turning toward the interrogation room, she turned toward the evidence locker. What's going on? Deputy Reeves stopped, looked both ways, then met his eyes. I'm getting you out of here. We have 4 minutes before shift change. James studied her face, looking for the trap, the angle. Why would you do that? Because I watched the security footage from the diner. I saw what Connor Aldrich did to Maggie O'Brien. I saw Sheriff Holbrook cover it up. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. And because my father lost his farm to Aldrich Financial 3 years ago, took a bridge loan during a drought, couldn't make the payments when the interest spiked. Victor Aldrich foreclosed. She pulled out a keyring, started unlocking the evidence locker. My father killed himself in his barn 6 months later. I found him. Her hands shook slightly. I became a deputy because I thought I could change the system from the inside. I was wrong. The system is rotten all the way through. She handed James his personal effects. Phone, wallet, keys. Your motorcycle is in the impound lot, 2 blocks west. I left the gate unlocked. What about Ghost? Animal control facility is across town. I can't help you there. Not enough time. James pocketed his belongings. They'll know you helped me. I know. Deputy Reeves Charlotte, her first name was, Charlotte met his eyes. I don't care anymore. I'm done being complicit. She led him through a service corridor, out a back door into the pre-dawn darkness. Go, now. Why should I trust you? Charlotte pulled out her phone. Showed him a video file. I've been recording Sheriff Holbrook's calls for 8 months. I have him on tape coordinating with Victor Aldrich, discussing payoffs, covering up crimes. She forwarded the file to James's phone. That's your insurance. Now go before the shift changes. James ran. 2 blocks west. The impound lot gate was indeed unlocked. His Harley sat in the corner. They'd searched the saddlebags, scattered his tools, but the bike was intact. He fired it up and rode. No destination in mind yet. Just away, east into the mountains where the roads became logging trails and the cell coverage disappeared. He found an abandoned hunting cabin 15 miles into the national forest, checked it for occupants. Empty. James secured the perimeter and allowed himself to think. Charlotte Reeves had given him a gift. Audio evidence of Holbrook's corruption. That was leverage. But Ghost was still in animal control. And James knew what would happen if he didn't act fast. Holbrook would have the dog put down. Dangerous animal, attacked multiple people, standard procedure. James checked his phone. The audio file Charlotte had sent was damning. Holbrook discussing payments with someone. The voice on the other end was familiar. Victor Aldrich himself. The seal is more problematic than anticipated. Victor's voice was calm, professional. How long can you hold him? 72 hours without formal charges, Holbrook answered. After that, I'll need to file paperwork. 72 hours is sufficient. By then, the evidence will be disposed of. The witnesses will be convinced to remain silent. What about the dog? Euthanize it. Today, I want no loose ends. The recording ended. James listened to it 3 more times, memorizing every word. Then he called Nolan Hayes. Reaper, where the hell are you? I've been trying to reach you for 6 hours. I need 2 things, James said. First, did you verify the evidence I sent? Yes, it's solid, RICO case, systematic fraud. I forwarded it to an FBI agent I trust. Catherine Brennan, Financial Crimes Division out of Seattle. She's clean, she's interested. How long until she can move? She needs to build the case properly. Subpoenas, warrants, maybe 2 weeks. I don't have 2 weeks. And James explained the situation, the fires, the frame job, his escape. Nolan was silent for a long moment. Jesus Christ, Reaper, you're a fugitive now. I know. Come in. Turn yourself in to the FBI. We'll protect you. They have my dog in animal control. Holbrook's going to have him killed today. I can't leave him. James, I need the second thing, intel. Everything you can find on Victor Aldrich's head of security. Raymond Keller, former Delta Force. I need to know his patterns, his training, his weaknesses. Another pause. You're going after him. I'm going after all of them, but I need my dog first. This is insane. This is war, and I didn't start it. Nolan sighed. I'll send you what I have on Keller, but James, be smart. These people have resources. They have reach. You're one man. One man is all it takes if he knows what he's doing. James hung up. 30 seconds later, his phone buzzed. Encrypted file from Nolan. Raymond Keller's service record. Delta Force, 8 years. Specialized in direct action and protective services. Deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. Multiple commendations. Medically retired after taking shrapnel to the leg in Mosul. Current employment, Aldrich Security Consulting. Personal protection and special projects for Victor Aldrich. Translation, Victor's enforcer. James studied the file, looking for patterns, habits, anything he could exploit. Then his phone rang, unknown number. He answered without speaking. Mr. Donovan. The voice was male, older, cultured. My name is Victor Aldrich. I believe we should talk. James said nothing. You made quite an impression on my son yesterday and on my business operations. The federal investigation your NCIS friend initiated is inconvenient. How did you get this number? I have resources, Mr. Donovan, just as I'm sure you've discovered about me, which is why I'm calling, to offer you a way out. I'm listening. Leave Crescent Bay tonight. Take your evidence, your righteous anger, and your dog. In return, I'll personally ensure that every debt associated with your wife's treatment is forgiven, your credit restored, a fresh start anywhere you choose. James almost laughed. You think I came here for money? I think you came here for revenge, and I'm offering you something better. Victor's voice hardened slightly. But I need you to understand something, Mr. Donovan. I'm only making this offer once. If you refuse, if you continue this crusade, I will destroy you. Not metaphorically, literally. I will take everything you have left and grind it into dust. You already took everything I had. My wife's name was Elena. She was a combat medic, 30 years caring for people who couldn't care for themselves. And when she got sick, your company sent collectors to her hospital room. James's voice didn't waver. They called her every day. They told her she was worthless, that she'd ruined our lives, that she should give up. She died believing she was a burden. She died thinking she'd failed me. Silence on the line. And that's on you, Victor, not your employees. You. You designed the system, You created the protocols. You personally profited from her suffering. More silence. I'm sorry for your loss, Victor finally said. He didn't sound sorry. But business is business. If your wife couldn't handle the terms of her agreement, your son beat a woman today, James cut him off, slammed her face into a table in front of witnesses, and your sheriff covered it up. That's not business. That's a pattern. Connor is troubled. I'm addressing it. No, you're enabling it, just like you've enabled yourself for 30 years. James could hear Victor's breathing change, anger replacing the professional calm. You're making a mistake, Mr. Donovan. Maybe, but it's mine to make. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Goodbye, Mr. Donovan. I hope your principles keep you warm when you're sleeping in a cell. The line went dead. James sat in the silence of the hunting cabin. Victor had just confirmed everything. The corruption, the reach, the willingness to destroy anyone who threatened his empire. But he'd also revealed something else. He was scared. A man who wasn't scared didn't make phone calls offering deals. He just acted. Victor Aldrich was afraid of what James might do, afraid of the federal investigation, afraid that this time he might not be able to make it go away. Good. Fear was a weapon, and James knew how to use it. He spent the next hour planning. By noon, he had a strategy. Objective 1, rescue Ghost from animal control. Objective 2, find Maggie O'Brien. Make sure she was safe. Objective 3, gather more evidence. The USB drives were gone, but there had to be backups, paper trails, witnesses. Objective 4, survive long enough for FBI agent Brennan to build her case. Simple, not easy. James checked his weapons. The Sig Sauer was gone, confiscated during booking. But he had a backup Glock 19 hidden in a storage unit across town, and his SEAL training, and 14 years of experience staying alive when people were trying to kill him. It would have to be enough. At 2 p.m., James rode back toward Crescent Bay. He'd been running for 12 hours. Now it was time to start hunting. The animal control facility was a cinder block building on the edge of town. Chain link fence. Security cameras. One entrance. James parked the Harley 2 blocks away and approached on foot. Used his phone to hack the security camera system. 15 minutes of work. Not his specialty, but he'd cross-trained with the intelligence guys enough to manage basic penetration. The cameras looped old footage. To anyone watching the monitors, nothing was happening. James went over the fence in a blind spot, crossed the yard to the building. The back door had a simple lock. James had it open in 30 seconds. Inside, the smell hit him first. Animals, cleaning chemicals, fear. He moved through the corridor, checking cages, dogs barking, cats hissing, and then he found him. Ghost was in the last cage. The dog was on his feet the moment he saw James. No barking, just intense focus. "Hey boy," James whispered. "I've got you." He opened the cage. Ghost stepped out, pressed against James's leg. They'd been separated for less than 24 hours, but it felt like forever. James clipped on Ghost's tactical vest. The dog immediately shifted into work mode. "Let's go home." They made it to the back door before the alarm sounded. Someone had been watching after all. James ran, Ghost at his side, across the yard, over the fence. Behind them, voices shouting. A vehicle starting. James reached the Harley. Ghost jumped into the sidecar. They accelerated away just as the animal control truck pulled around the corner. But the truck wasn't alone. 2 sheriff's cruisers joined the pursuit, lights flashing, sirens wailing. James opened the throttle. The Harley surged forward, 80, 90, 100 miles per hour through residential streets. He took a hard left, cut through an alley, emerged on the highway heading north. The cruisers were fast, but the Harley was faster. And James knew these roads. He led them north for 5 miles, then cut east onto a logging road. The cruisers tried to follow, but their ground clearance wasn't designed for off-road. James and Ghost disappeared into the forest. They rode for another hour, deep into the mountains, to a place James had scouted weeks ago. A warehouse, abandoned, off the grid, safe, for now. Inside, James finally allowed himself to breathe. Ghost settled beside him. The dog's presence was grounding. Familiar. James's phone buzzed. Text message from Charlotte Reeves. "Holbrook knows I helped you. I'm burned, but I don't regret it. Be careful. They're hunting you." James texted back. "Thank you. Get somewhere safe." Her response came immediately. "I'm past safe. I'm all in. What do you need?" James thought about it. Charlotte had access to the sheriff's department. Information, resources, intel on Maggie O'Brien's location. They took her after the fire. I need to know where she is. 3 minutes passed, then no official record of her location. But I found something. Sheriff's log shows a protective custody transfer to private security. No address listed, but the authorization signature is Raymond Keller. James's jaw tightened. They had Maggie. This was bigger than he'd thought. Victor Aldrich wasn't just covering up crimes. He was actively hunting anyone who threatened him. James called Nolan Hayes again. Tell Agent Brennan she needs to move faster. They've kidnapped a witness, Maggie O'Brien, former Aldrich financial employee. She has evidence they can't afford to let surface. James' FBI can't just raid. Then tell them to prepare for a hostage rescue, because that's what this is becoming. James hung up and looked at Ghost. We've got work to do, boy. The dog's tail wagged once. Outside, the sun was setting. Storm clouds were gathering over the mountains. And in Crescent Bay, Victor Aldrich was about to learn something important. James Donovan wasn't running anymore. He was coming. The phone rang at exactly midnight. James had been expecting it. I have something you want. Victor Aldrich's voice was calm, almost pleasant. And you have something that concerns me. Where is she? Safe for now. Margaret O'Brien is a guest at one of my properties. Comfortable, well-fed, unharmed. A pause. That can change very quickly. James said nothing. Let the silence work. Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Donovan. You're going to turn yourself in to Sheriff Warren Holbrook. You're going to confess to arson and attempted murder. You're going to sign a statement admitting you fabricated evidence against my company. And then you're going to disappear into the federal prison system for the next 20 years. And if I do all that, you'll let Maggie go. I'll let her live. There's a difference. James looked at Ghost sitting alert beside him in the abandoned warehouse. The dog's ears were forward tracking every word through the phone speaker. I need proof she's alive, James said. Of course. Rustling sounds. Then Maggie's voice, weak but unmistakable. James, don't. It's a trap. They're going to kill you regardless. The sound of a slap, Maggie crying out. James's grip tightened on the phone. You have 18 hours, Victor said. Sheriff Holbrook will be waiting at the station at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. And Mr. Donovan, if I see any federal agents, any NCIS personnel, anyone other than you walking through that door, Margaret O'Brien dies. Am I clear? Crystal? Good. I'm glad we understand each other. The line went dead. James sat motionless for a long moment. Then he made 3 phone calls. First call, Nolan Hayes. I need everything you have on Victor Aldrich's properties. Houses, warehouses, offices, anything in a 50-mile radius of Crescent Bay. James, what are you planning? Something stupid. How long until Agent Brennan can move? She's assembling a team now, 48 hours minimum. She needs warrants approval from, I don't have 48 hours, I have 18. Then you need to wait. Let the professionals handle this. The professionals have been handling it for 30 years. Look where that got us. James disconnected before Nolan could argue. Second call, Charlotte Reeves. I need intel on Raymond Keller. Where does he live? What's his routine? Does he have family? Why do you need to know that? Because I'm going to make him tell me where Maggie is. Silence. Then Keller lives alone. Apartment downtown, 3rd floor. He's at the gym every morning, 5 a.m. Leaves for the Aldrich estate by 7. Does he have security at the apartment? I don't know. But James, this is insane. Keller is ex-Delta Force. He's not going to just tell you anything. Everyone tells you everything eventually. You just have to ask the right way. Third call, Ezra Blackwood, the elderly pharmacist who'd helped him before. Mr. Blackwood, I need a favor. Something that will make a man very cooperative without killing him. Ezra was quiet for a moment. How big is this man? 200 pounds, military training, high pain tolerance. I have something. But James, I need to know what you're planning. Is it justice or revenge? Does it matter? To me, it does. I didn't survive Korea and 73 years of life by helping people commit murder. James thought about Elena, about Maggie O'Brien's face being slammed into a table, about 347 families destroyed by predatory loans. Justice, he said finally, but the kind that works when the system's broken. That's the right answer. Come by the pharmacy at 2 a.m. back door. James ended the call and pulled up the map on his laptop. Nolan had sent him a list of Victor Aldrich's properties, 12 locations in Oregon, 3 in Washington, 2 in California, too many to search. He needed to narrow it down. He opened the audio file Charlotte had sent, the conversation between Holbrook and Victor, listened again and again. On the 4th listen, he heard it. Background noise on Victor's end, faint but distinctive. Ocean waves and something else. A foghorn, low and mournful. James cross-referenced the properties with coastal locations. That eliminated 8. Of the remaining 4, only 1 was close enough to the shipping lanes to hear foghorns. The Aldrich estate, the family mansion on the promontory north of town. Victor was keeping Maggie in his own house. Bold, arrogant, exactly what James would expect. At 2 a.m., James rode to Ezra's pharmacy. The old man was waiting at the back door with a small vial. Ketamine derivative, Ezra explained, mixed with a muscle relaxant. 10 milligrams will make him very suggestible. 20 will knock him unconscious. More than 30 could stop his heart. How fast does it work? Intramuscular injection, 2 minutes. Intravenous, 30 seconds. James pocketed the vial. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. James, I need you to understand something. Ezra's weathered hand gripped his shoulder. What you're about to do is going to change you. Violence always does. Even righteous violence. I've already changed, the day Elena died. No, that was grief. This is something else. The old man's eyes held decades of hard-won wisdom. Just remember who you were before all this. Remember what she would have wanted. James thought about Elena's last words. Promise me you'll find peace, not revenge. I'll try, he said. It was the best he could offer. Raymond Keller's apartment building was a modern structure near downtown. Security cameras, keycard entry. But James had been breaking into places like this since his second year with SEAL Team 6. He entered through the parking garage at 4:30 a.m., took the stairs to the 3rd floor, picked the lock on Keller's door in 45 seconds. The apartment was exactly what James expected. Minimalist, clean, everything in its place. The home of a professional who lived alone and liked it that way. James moved through this space silently. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a home office with a locked filing cabinet. He settled into position behind the kitchen counter with clear sight lines to the door. Ghost lay beside him, controlled and ready. They waited. At 6:47 a.m., James heard footsteps in the hallway, a key in the lock. Raymond Keller entered his apartment. He was exactly as his file photo showed. Late 40s, graying hair cut military short, lean and hard, moving with the economy of motion that came from decades of training. He made it 3 steps inside before he sensed something wrong. His hand moved toward the gun under his jacket. Don't, James's voice cut through the silence. I'm faster than you, and my dog is faster than both of us. Keller froze. His eyes found James behind the counter, then found ghost teeth bared in silent warning. James Donovan, Keller said, no fear in his voice. Just assessment. Victor said you were smart. Guess he was right. Hands where I can see them. Slow. Keller complied, raised his hands to shoulder height. Now the gun. 2 fingers. Place it on the floor. Kick it toward me. Keller removed a Glock 19 from his shoulder holster. Did as instructed. How'd you find me? He asked. Does it matter? Professional curiosity. I had help from someone in the sheriff's department. Someone tired of covering up crimes. Keller smiled slightly. Charlotte Reeves. Yeah, we knew she was compromised. Victor was planning to deal with her this week. Not anymore, he's not. James stood, kept his own weapon trained on Keller. On your knees, hands behind your head. Keller didn't move. You're not going to shoot me. You're right, but Ghost will tear your throat out if I give the word. And unlike me, he doesn't have moral qualms about violence. Keller looked at the German shepherd, saw something in the dog's eyes that made him kneel. James approached, patted Keller down, found a backup piece in an ankle holster, a knife clipped to his belt, another knife in his boot. You came prepared, James said. Always am, you should know that. SEAL Team 6, right? We ran some joint operations with you guys in Ramadi. I'm not here to reminisce. Then what are you here for? Information. Where is Victor Aldrich keeping Maggie O'Brien? Keller laughed. You really think I'm going to tell you that? James pulled out the vial Ezra had given him, held it up so Keller could see. This is a pharmaceutical cocktail, very effective at making people cooperative. I'm going to inject it. You're going to tell me everything I want to know. The only question is whether you make this easy or hard. You're bluffing. You're not that kind of soldier. You're right, I'm not. James's tone went flat. But my wife died because your employer destroyed her. So right now, I'm not a soldier. I'm something else. He could see the calculation in Keller's eyes, trying to assess how far James would go. Last chance, James said. Where is she? Aldrich Estate, North Wing, 2nd floor. 3 guards rotating shifts. James studied Keller's face, looking for the lie. That was too easy. Keller's smile returned. Because it's a trap. Victor knew you'd come for me. He's been waiting for you to find out where she is. Then why tell me? Because one of two things happens now. Either you go to the estate and walk into an ambush, or you don't go and Maggie O'Brien dies anyway. Victor wins either way. James considered this. Keller was probably telling the truth. It was exactly the kind of play Victor would make. How many men at the estate? 12, armed, trained. You're good, Donovan, but you're not that good. I've dealt with worse odds. In Afghanistan, sure, with air support and a full team. But here alone you're going to D. James injected the ketamine mixture into Keller's arm. What are you doing? Keller's eyes widened. Making sure you stay out of my way for a few hours. Keller tried to stand. His legs buckled. He collapsed onto the carpet conscious but unable to move. You son of a... Ghost, watch. The dog positioned himself over Keller, teeth near his throat. James called Charlotte Reeves. I need you to call Agent Catherine Brennan, FBI Financial Crimes. Give her this address. Tell her Raymond Keller is here. He'll be conscious and cooperative in about 2 hours. He knows everything about Aldrich's operation. What about you? I'm going to get Maggie. James, if Keller says it's a trap, it probably is, but I'm out of options. He disconnected before she could argue. James looked down at Keller, who was staring up at him with dilated pupils and slurred speech. You're making a mistake, Keller mumbled. Victor's 10 steps ahead of you. Maybe, but I'm the one who showed up in your apartment at dawn, so maybe he's not as smart as he thinks. James left. Ghost followed. They had work to do. The Aldrich estate sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. 10 acres of manicured grounds behind a 12-foot stone wall. The main house was a massive structure of glass and timber. Modern architecture trying to blend with the natural landscape. James observed it from a distance. Used binoculars to map the security. Cameras on the wall. Motion sensors on the grounds. Guards patrolling in pairs. Keller had been right. This was a fortress. A direct assault was suicide. So James wouldn't assault it directly. He spent the next 6 hours preparing. Gathered materials. Built what he needed. Made a phone call to Nolan Hayes. I need you to do something for me. Something that might end your career. Jesus, James. What now? In exactly 4 hours, I need you to make a call. Tell the Coast Guard there's a distress signal from a yacht off the coast. Give them these coordinates. James read off numbers that would put the search area 5 miles south of the Aldrich estate. That's a false emergency. I could go to prison for that. I know. That's why I'm asking, not ordering. You can say no. A long pause. What are you planning? A diversion. When the Coast Guard helicopter flies over, Victor's security team will be watching. It'll give me a window. A window to do what? Something stupid. Another pause. Then 4 hours. I'll make the call. But James, if you die doing this, Elena's going to kill me in the afterlife. If I die doing this, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I tried to do it the right way first. At 5:47 p.m., James was in position. He'd approached the estate from the ocean side, climbing the cliff face in the fading light. 200 feet of vertical rock, no ropes, just his hands and boots and 14 years of experience that said impossible was just another word for difficult. Ghost had waited at the top. Dogs couldn't climb cliffs. So James had taken a different route for the dog. Drugged meat thrown over the wall the night before. The patrol dogs were sleeping peacefully in their kennels. He'd brought Ghost through a drainage culvert that ran under the wall. The dog emerged covered in mud but undetected. Now they waited in the gardens watching the north wing of the mansion. At 5:53 p.m. James heard it. The distinctive sound of a Coast Guard helicopter. Right on schedule. The guards turned toward the ocean. Watching the helicopter search the water. James moved. He crossed the lawn in a dead sprint. Ghost at his side. Reached the mansion wall. Used a grappling hook to reach a second-story balcony. Pulled himself up. Ghost followed, carried in a harness James had rigged. They were inside the north wing. The corridor was empty. Thick carpet muffled their footsteps. James moved room by room, clearing each one. 3 guards, Keller had said. James had seen 2 outside. That meant 1 inside. He found the guard in the hallway outside a locked door. Young, maybe 25. Trying to look professional, but clearly not expecting actual trouble. James approached from behind, applied a chokehold. The guard struggled for 8 seconds, then went limp. James lowered him quietly to the floor, took his keys, unlocked the door. Inside, Maggie O'Brien sat in a chair, hands tied, face bruised, but alive. Her eyes widened when she saw him. James, she whispered, you shouldn't have come. It's a trap. I know. He cut her restraints, helped her stand. Can you walk? I think so. The lights blazed on, bright, blinding. James's vision whited out for a moment. When it cleared, he saw them. 8 men, tactical gear, weapons raised, positioned around the room in a textbook hostage rescue formation. And in the doorway, Victor Aldrich. He was exactly as his photos showed. 64 years old, but looking younger. Silver hair, expensive suit, the bearing of a man who'd never been told no in his entire life. "Mr. Donovan," Victor said pleasantly, "welcome to my home. I've been expecting you." James didn't move. Ghost was rigid at his side, waiting for the command. "Let her go. This is between us." "No, this is about teaching lessons." Victor stepped into the room. "You see, Mr. Donovan, I've built something extraordinary. An empire. And empires require order. Rules, consequences for those who challenge authority. You murdered my wife." "I did no such thing. Your wife died of cancer. Tragic, certainly, but not my fault. You harassed her into giving up. Your collectors called her every day. Told her she was worthless. Told her to stop fighting." Victor shrugged. "Business is business. If she couldn't handle the stress, that's unfortunate. But it's not murder." James felt rage building. Controlled it. Channeled it. "Your son beat Maggie O'Brien in front of 17 witnesses. Connor is troubled. I'm addressing it. By covering it up. By paying off the sheriff. By burning down houses. I'm protecting my family. Surely you understand that." James looked at Victor. Really looked at him. And saw something unexpected. Grief, old and buried, but still there. In the lines around his eyes. The set of his shoulders. "Your wife," James said quietly. "Catherine. She died in 1986. Cancer." Victor's expression flickered. "What do you know about my wife? I know you couldn't save her. I know the hospitals wanted money you didn't have. I know the insurance companies denied her treatment. I know you felt powerless. You know nothing. I know you became exactly what destroyed you. You turned your pain into a weapon and spent 30 years hurting people the same way you were hurt." Victor's composure cracked. "Don't you dare talk about Catherine. You don't have the right." "Maggie O'Brien has the right," James said. "She was Catherine's night nurse. September 1986, St. Catherine's Hospital." Victor turned slowly to look at Maggie, color draining from his face. "You," he whispered. Maggie nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Room 509. I held her hand when she died. You were downstairs fighting with the insurance adjusters." Victor took a step back, like he'd been struck. "Catherine asked me to tell you something," Maggie continued. Her last words, "I've carried them for 38 years. "What?" Victor's voice was barely audible. "What did she say?" "She said, tell Victor I forgive him. Tell him to let go of the anger. Tell him our love was enough." The room went silent. 8 armed guards, James, Ghost, Maggie, Victor, all frozen. Victor's face crumpled. 38 years of carefully constructed armor shattered in an instant. He sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 64 years. "She forgave me," his voice broke, "after everything I failed to do." "She did," Maggie said softly. "But you didn't forgive yourself. So you built this empire of cruelty. You became what you hated most." Victor put his head in his hands. Connor Aldrich burst into the room. He was high. James could see it immediately. Dilated pupils, erratic movements, the gun in his hand shaking. "Dad!" Connor shouted. "What are you doing? Shoot him! Shoot them both!" Connor put the gun down. Victor's voice was quiet but firm. "No. You said we take what we want. We destroy threats. That's what you talk with me." "I was wrong." "You're weak." Connor aimed the gun at Maggie. "She's the threat. She knows everything. I'm fixing this." James moved. He threw himself between Connor and Maggie as the gun fired. The bullet hit James high on the right shoulder. Spun him around. He went down hard. Ghost launched at Connor. Took him to the ground. The gun skittered away. The guards moved in, but Victor shouted, "Stop! Don't shoot the dog!" James was on the floor, blood spreading across his shirt, vision going gray at the edges. He heard sirens. Multiple vehicles, close. The door burst open. FBI tactical team, 12 agents in full gear. Leading them was a woman in her 40s. Dark hair pulled back. FBI windbreaker. FBI, everyone on the ground now. Agent Catherine Brennan had arrived. James's vision was fading. He saw guards being cuffed. Saw Connor being dragged away screaming. Saw Victor sitting motionless, tears on his face. Saw Maggie safe. Ghost was at James's side, licking his face, whining. "Good boy," James whispered. "Stand down. We're done." Then everything went black. James woke in a hospital bed 3 days later. The first thing he saw was Ghost. The dog was lying beside the bed, against hospital regulations, but apparently someone had made an exception. The second thing he saw was Nolan Hayes. "Welcome back, Reaper." James's throat was dry. "Maggie, safe, giving testimony to the FBI. She's going to be their star witness. Victor in federal custody, cooperating. He's providing evidence on 17 other predatory lenders across 9 states, setting up a $250 million restitution fund for victims. Connor, charged with assault, kidnapping, attempted murder, looking at 22 years. His father refused to help him, told the prosecutors to throw the book at him." James processed this. "Why is Victor cooperating?" Agent Brennan said he broke down during interrogation, started talking about his wife, about what Maggie told him, about how he'd become what he hated. Nolan paused. "He's dying, James. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. I think he wants to fix what he can before it's over." James thought about that, about Victor Aldrich, about how pain could twist people into monsters, about redemption and whether it was ever too late. "The sheriff," James asked. "Arrested, along with FBI Assistant Director Thomas Drake. Charlotte Reeves's recordings were admissible. The whole corruption network is coming down." Nolan leaned forward. "Charlotte resigned from the sheriff's department. Agent Brennan gave her immunity in exchange for testimony. Clean slate." James closed his eyes. It was over. Actually over. "Elena would be proud," Nolan said quietly. "You got justice for her. For all of them. I got revenge." "No, you got justice. There's a difference. Revenge would have been putting a bullet in Victor's head. Justice is making sure he spends whatever time he has left trying to undo the damage." Ghost shifted, put his head on James's hand. "There's someone else here to see you," Nolan said. "Multiple someones, actually." The door opened. Maggie O'Brien entered. Behind her, Charlotte Reeves, Ezra Blackwood, Dr. Ruth Sullivan walking with a cane, but walking. They gathered around the bed. "Thank you," Maggie said simply, "for saving my life, for believing me when no one else would." "Thank you for telling me about Elena," James replied, "for helping me understand." "What will you do now?" Ruth asked. "When you're healed?" James hadn't thought that far ahead. "I don't know." "We have an idea," Charlotte said. "If you're interested." She showed him paperwork. "Plans for a veteran support organization, matching service dogs with combat veterans who had PTSD. The Donovan Center," Charlotte explained, "named after your wife. We have seed funding from the restitution fund. Maggie's managing operations. Ruth is medical director. Ezra is consulting. We just need someone to run the training program." The first veteran enrolled. Maggie's eyes brightened. "My son, Sean, he completed his intake yesterday, lost his way after the construction accident, left him disabled. But now," her voice caught, "now he has purpose again." James looked at Ghost, at the people gathered around his bed, at the possibility of building something instead of destroying. "Yes," he said, "I'm interested." 6 months later, James stood on the cliffside property where the Victorian house had once stood. The house had been rebuilt, larger, designed specifically for the program. Kennels, training facilities, living quarters for veterans going through rehabilitation. The Donovan Center. Today was the grand opening. 200 people attended. Veterans, families, press, local officials who'd been cleaned out and replaced after the corruption scandal. Maggie gave a speech about second chances, about how one person standing up could change everything. Charlotte spoke about her father, about how his death would now save other families. Ruth talked about healing, about transformation. Then it was James's turn. He stood at the podium, Ghost at his side. The dog was graying now, nearly 9 years old, slowing down, but still alert, still loyal. "My wife Elena was a healer," James began. "She spent 30 years taking care of people who couldn't take care of themselves. When she got sick, the system failed her. It broke her. And I spent a long time being angry about that." He paused. "But anger doesn't bring people back. It doesn't heal anything. What heals is purpose, community, giving the pain meaning." James looked out at the crowd. "This center exists because Elena believed in second chances. She believed broken things could be fixed. Broken people could find purpose again. Every veteran who comes through this program, every dog we train, every life we help rebuild. That's her legacy. That's what she died fighting for." He felt Ghost press against his leg, the way he always did when James needed grounding. "So thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in this. And thank you for proving that sometimes the good guys actually win. The crowd erupted in applause. After the ceremony, Sean O'Brien approached. 32 years old, walking with a prosthetic leg, a Belgian Malinois named Valor at his side. "Mr. Donovan," Sean said, "I wanted to thank you personally for saving my mom, for giving me this." He gestured at Valor. "I was drowning. Now I'm breathing again." James shook his hand. "Your mother never gave up on you. That's what saved you." "Maybe, but you gave us both a reason to keep fighting." Sean walked away, Valor perfectly in step with him. James walked down to the beach. Ghost followed more slowly now. The dog's hips were bothering him, age catching up. The Pacific stretched endlessly before them, gray and churning. Elena had loved this view. James pulled out the photograph he always carried. Elena on their wedding day, laughing. "We did it, love," he whispered. "Not the way you asked, but the best way I knew how." He felt Ghost's head against his hand. In the distance, he could see the center. Lights on, activity visible through the windows. Veterans arriving for the first residential program. Dogs being matched with handlers. Life. Purpose. Second chances. It wasn't peace. Not exactly. But it was close enough. James and Ghost stood on the beach until sunset, watching the waves, remembering, healing. And somewhere in the federal prison in California, Victor Aldrich sat in a cell, dying slowly, writing letters of apology to 347 families, trying to undo 30 years of damage in 6 months. It wouldn't be enough, could never be enough, but it was something, and sometimes something was all you could manage. James turned from the ocean and walked back to the center, to his new life, to his purpose. Ghost followed, always faithful, always there. The sun set over the Pacific. The waves kept rolling, patient, eternal. And James Donovan finally understood what Elena had meant. Peace wasn't the absence of war. It was knowing what you fought for mattered. Epilogue. 1 year later, the letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. James was in the training yard with 3 veterans and their matched dogs when Charlotte brought it to him. "It's from Victor Aldrich," she said quietly. James looked at the envelope. Federal prison stamp, postmarked 2 weeks ago. He opened it. "Mr. Donovan, by the time you read this, I will be dead. The doctors gave me 6 months. I lasted 7, small victories. I wanted you to know that the restitution fund has distributed $247 million to 319 families. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's what I could do. I've spent the last months writing to every family I destroyed. Most don't respond. Some send back letters telling me to rot in hell. I don't blame them, but a few have written back. They've told me their stories, how they've rebuilt, how they've survived, how they've found ways to forgive. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that Maggie O'Brien gave me something I didn't think was possible. She gave me Catherine's last words. After 38 years, our love was enough. I've spent my entire adult life believing it wasn't. Believing that if I'd been stronger, richer, more powerful, I could have saved her. So I built an empire to prove I'd never be powerless again. All I proved was that power without love is just another kind of death. Tell Maggie thank you. Tell her that Catherine's forgiveness gave me the strength to face what I'd become. And tell your wife Elena, wherever she is, that I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry." Victor Aldrich. James folded the letter, looked out at the training yard. Sean O'Brien was working with Valor, teaching a new veteran how to read their dog's signals. Ghost was lying in the shade, watching everything with patient eyes. "He died 3 days ago," Charlotte said. "Agent Brennan called this morning. Pancreatic cancer. He lasted longer than anyone expected." James pocketed the letter. "Good. Good that he died. Good that he tried." Charlotte nodded, understood. They stood in silence for a moment. "James," Charlotte said, "do you think people can really change after everything they've done?" James thought about Victor Aldrich, about Connor, who'd refused every offer of redemption and would spend the next 20 years in prison. About himself and how Elena's death had nearly turned him into the very thing he was fighting. "Some can," he said, "if they're willing to face what they've become, if they're willing to spend whatever time they have left trying to fix it." He paused. Victor Aldrich destroyed hundreds of lives. Nothing he did in his last months changes that, but it matters that he tried. And Connor? Connor chose hate. His father offered him a different path. He refused it. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. "My father chose hate too. After he lost the farm, after Aldrich foreclosed, he couldn't see past his anger." Her voice dropped. "I found him in the barn. Rope, chair, Note that said he was sorry he couldn't be stronger. James put a hand on her shoulder. Your father's death wasn't weakness. It was pain, and you've honored him by making sure other families don't suffer the same way. Charlotte wiped her eyes. Thank you. She walked back toward the main building. James looked at Ghost. Come on, boy. Let's go check on the new arrivals. They walked toward the kennel. 5 new rescue dogs had arrived this morning. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, 1 Labrador with a calm, patient temperament perfect for PTSD support. Each one would be matched with a veteran who needed them. Each one would save a life, just like Ghost had saved James's. The dog looked up at him, graying muzzle, cloudy eyes, hips that ached in the cold, but still working, still serving, still faithful. Not much longer, boy, James said softly. You've earned your rest. Ghost's tail wagged once. They entered the kennel together, and somewhere over the Pacific, the sun set on another day at the Donovan Center, where broken things were being healed, where broken people were finding purpose, where Elena's dream lived on.